is Ryan, for those of you who don't know, aka Life Force. I'm from Canada. I've been studying human design both through self-study and the formal IHTS pathway since around late 2015. It's been a fascinating and turbulent journey, because once you start to learn about the particulars of your design, it really does bring up stuff. It makes you ponder and it causes you to question things and re-examine your choices and your relationships. And for me personally, it definitely has been a transformational journey, especially in the application of what I've learned, right? Which is, I want to mention that too. Everything you learn here, take it with a grain of salt. Please go back into any of the textbooks and read about it. Do your own study. You don't have to believe anything at face value. I encourage you not to. However, again, the information I've included in this presentation is source accurate, so you can go back to the textbooks to verify it. But yeah, it's been a journey. I really enjoy talking about human design and sharing the different things that I have absorbed and learned about it over the years. And like I was saying earlier, tribal ego circuitry is a component of this larger, call it framework or understanding of human design called circuitry, which is the study of how the channels flow through the different centers within the body graph, from point A to point B and so forth. And there are three primary ones: the individual, collective, and the tribe, plus what's called the integration channel, which is that funny looking channel on the middle left of the body graph with four gates sticking out of it. And you can actually break down these circuit groups, the major circuit groups, into major and minor circuit groups, so that there's actually 7 in total. So the first one we're going to look at today is called, like I mentioned, tribal ego, which is the major circuit group in terms of the tribal circuit group. Okay. And you can think of tribal energy as the energy responsible for the support of our communities through the forming of bargains and the establishment of business. So it's very much so about materialism, bargains, business, the tribe, family, ancestry, tradition, loyalty, these deep-rooted themes in our nature that propel us to interact with one another, to build the world and to build businesses and to engage in economic activities for the sole purpose of basically gaining material advantage so that we can support ourselves and our family, right? And it's hardwired into us. So, like I mentioned, the super keynote, and this is a term used in design to describe the different circuit groups. The super keynote is support. And the thing to realize about tribal circuitry is that, unlike individuality or the collective, which is all about empowerment or sharing, tribal circuitry really does require material support and touch. The senses, again, are touch and smell, right? So it's very physical, it's very personal, it's very sticky. It's about your family, it's about your friends, it's about the business structure, the business empire that you might be a part of, right? Entrepreneurialism, these really deep-rooted themes in our cultures, in our communities, that are built to sustain human interactive capacity for working together, accomplishing common goals, building things, and running businesses, right? And communities and nations and so forth, right? It's very human. So the ego circuit represents the communal and material forces that shape our lives at the level of family, business, and community. This circuit group carries the most materialistic, potentially aggressive, and territorial energy of all the circuit groups. It is here in the tribal circuit or tribal ego circuit, where you will find the themes of ownership, hierarchy, tradition, and loyalty. This circuit expresses through two divergent pathways or versions that both converge in the heart center before expressing via the channel of money to the throat center. So visually on the left, which is the anatomical right in the body graph, you have this entrepreneurial stream from the 54, 32, 44, 26 into the heart. And then you have this more communal stream from the 19 stream of sensitivity from the 1949, 37, 40. And again, they both converge in the heart center and then express through the channel of money. Okay, so that's kind of the basic flow, is it's from the root to the emotions, to the ego, up to the throat. So on the anatomical right, so the spleen is the stream of instinct. And again, this is a splenic sort of life or death approach to support, whereby success and advancement is found through competitive business structures and materialistic entrepreneurialism. Right? So this is where you'll find people who have the drive and the instinct and the business savvy ability to, go out into the world and make it as an entrepreneur, right? The drive and the ego and the willpower to sell and to market and to be successful. On the anatomical left side of the body graph, this is called the stream of sensitivity, right? It's a stream because it passes through an awareness center, which again, in this case, is the solar plexus. And again, like I mentioned, this represents a more communal sort of interdependence to resource acquisition and distribution, often through social support structures bound by tradition and a hierarchy with a central god or spirit that provides our families and communities with basic needs such as food, shelter, clothing, and something to believe in or feel a part of. I also mentioned that this circuit is associated with manifesting what we would perceive as the extremes so often seen in today's modern materialistic societies, as is exemplified through the display of wealth and territorial dominance of a first world country versus the materially impoverished and socially unstable third world countries. At some level or another, it is all tied back to material gain, control of resource distribution, and opportunities for advancement, again, within business structures. And this circuit group is all about that, right? It's about who has what and who's controlling who, and how it's all organized based on a hierarchical structure. And again, with it being so materialistic and support focused, you get all sorts of expressions in the real world for how resources are actually distributed and how people, in terms of business opportunities, are able to either climb the ladder or be left without those kind of opportunities. It's all dependent on who carries this energy, how it's structured in their design, and how they express it in the world, right? That's the other thing too. Think about this as like, these are all qualities that are expressed through people's actions because they have it in their design somewhere. And later on in the presentation, I'm going to use an example of someone to give you guys an idea of what this kind of looks like, this energy might look like in the real world. Yeah, go right ahead, please. That's a great question. With this circuit group, it's a little bit interesting because it's fuel for the potential of the possibility of what's called a mechanic. And the mechanic here is deliverance and the egoist. So on one side, you have people doing favors for the community. And on the other side, you have the salesperson or the marketer ensuring that new products are sold and transmitted to prospective buyers. Okay. And the actual expression, and it's a great question because it's interesting about how tribalism or this whole capitalistic material approach to life works, is that there's always a figurehead that controls everything, that's in charge of the money, right? There's a hierarchy. And now sometimes you'll see people within their design, let's say they're a manifester, they might actually have like the 44, 26, 21, 45, right? So they're the transmitter in control of their own finances, right? But often what you'll see is most people have a component of this area and everybody answers to somebody with the money, right? There's a figurehead. And again, in the example I'll use later on, you'll be able to see what this looks like in real life. It's not the same as the collective or individuality where you get an individual who can go the whole 9 yards by themselves, right? Feel for the potential possibility of expression, and they're out in the world having their own individual experiences. Tribalism is like everybody's working for the boss, right? There's always someone who is that figurehead. And again, the more charts you run, eventually you're going to run into one where you're like, wow, this guy's some CEO or captain or head of the tribe, obviously in their bio and in the real world, and you'll see that they're probably a 45-21. Again, the example later is just that exactly. So yeah, the tribal energy is deeply connected to our ancestry, bloodlines, and the requirement through the ages for members of the family to rise up, earn a living, and provide for their children through exchanging their personal resources, being energy, for material gain. And in our modern society, that's money, right? Doesn't always have to be money. Of course, bartering and trade will be found here, but for simple understanding, this is where you see people ambitiously trying to climb the ladder to attain a higher position in some corporate structure so they can make more money and feed it back to their families. Buy bigger houses, buy bigger cars, so on and so forth. In one extreme. This circuit group, unlike the rest, demands physical support, touch, and material things in order to feel successful and at peace. Like I mentioned before, it's not like individuality where an individual can listen to a song and feel satiated because the music speaks to them, right? If you have someone who is very tribal in your life, chances are they want something, right? Whether it be a gift or a ring or a necklace or a new watch, something physical, something material. That's what satisfies the need of the tribe. And of course, food, right? Food is a big thing. Food, clothing, shelter. And you can begin to see, okay, the conditioning impact of this energy. If you think of it that way, the conditioning impact of this energy on us as individuals to be supportive for our families. It's built into us. Doesn't necessarily mean we have it, right? But we're all conditioned at one level or another to try to plug into this circuit group and operate in a supportive manner, whether it be consciously or unconsciously. So the tribal ego circuit, and this is another big point. So I mentioned before that this is actually the major tribal circuit. It's called the ego circuit, okay? And it's these channels. But the tribal ego circuit surrounds the fertile and nurturing nature of the defense circuit, which we'll look at next week, which are these two channels that run between the sacral and the spleen and the sacral and the solar plexus, both of which are also tribal. However, it's technically a different circuit group. It's the minor circuit group of tribal. And what this group does, and you'll see, it surrounds the sacral, okay, is it establishes the material and communal support structures that are essential for the well-being and longevity of our children and our tribes. It's really remarkable when you start to look at it that way. It's like, what's the point of this? What's like, why engage in all this crazy making business stuff making bargains with your neighbor, you know, joining a religion so you can feel a part of a community. What is this all about? Well, it's all about reproduction and the nurturing of the children so that the children can be born into something that supports them in their well-being and their longevity, right? Imagine being born into the world where the businesses didn't exist, or there were no support structures, or there were no opportunities for advancement. You were just born, and there you are, right? Nothing to engage in terms of material business. It would kind of be a shocking place to live, wouldn't it? So you see, there's a point to it all. There's a function. So this circuit drives us to make bargains, build more, sell more, have more, be in control of it all, and unify around common gods as the usness, being the tribe, the family, the nation, expands its territory and establishes dominion. And I use those words very selectively because, again, tribal ego circuit can be very aggressive and territorial. And people with this energy, typically in history, are the ones who go out and migrate and establish new territory and take over other people's lands, one tribe taking over the land of another tribe, also that they can protect their own tribe and provide a stable environment for their own tribe to survive in the future. It has extremes, and you'll see it even in the lines when you read the lines of the different gates associated with this circuitry, you'll see it. Any questions before we kind of move on to the next section here? Anything anybody wants to share? Anything coming up? Well, that one gate would be a significant theme. Are you talking about you personally? Anyone? Yeah, that one theme of that gate would be incredibly significant to that person and how they connect to this circuit group. You can think of it like a function or a role, right? And it depends on which one it is. If it's a root gate, either the 54 or the 19, then it's a pressure. The 54 is the gate of ambition, for example. So someone with the 54, well, it's natural for them to participate in a business structure where they bring their drive and ambition to rise up and do better and work harder than other people and so on and so forth, right? It depends on which one it is. Essentially, that's the process of analysis. And again, we can look into that later on to help answer your question more accurately. But it would be, you can just think of it as it would be like their major theme for how they connect. Very, very, very tribal. And I'm glad that landed for you in that way. And this is what I was saying in the beginning. When I started to study this area of human design, circuitry, and these themes, it made everything make sense. Because if you study the channels or the gates independent of this foundational understanding, it's like cool, nice, clever, but it doesn't really stick. And again, when we look at it this way, it really does stick. And your sharing there, I do actually just want to say another thing here. And it's another one of the points I forgot to mention from the previous slide. Okay. And this is an example, okay, with the tribal ego circuitry. Cohesive harmony can be found within a family unit when there are sufficient resources in place to ensure everyone is fairly supported. Otherwise, sensitivity, bitterness, and anger may arise when members sense a lack of support. And I say bitterness, and I say anger, and I say sensitivity because, as you'll notice, in this circuit group, these 4 channels are all projected channels, right? Most of tribal circuitry, at least in the major circuit group, is projector territory. And what happens to projectors when they're not recognized and supported? They become bitter, right? And so this is the tribal theme of bitterness, is not having the material resources in place. And then once you get to the 2145, of course, the ego to the throat, we have a manifesting energy, hence the anger, right? Now, once you get into tribal defense circuitry, which is the minor circuit, that's when we start to experience frustration. But please see the difference between frustration and bitterness and anger, because the frustration is all about bonding, partnership, and the nurturing of the children. There's no crossover. People get bitter and angry in business, and they get frustrated with their families and their partners. I mean, think about it, right? It's in the mechanics. It's why we experience that kind of energy in the way that we do. And also, it's the area where this is a unique circuit group where you have representation, when you look at the tribal circuitry in totality, between all 3 types, right? Generators, projectors, and manifestors can all have tribal ego or tribal defense channels or life force defined in their chart. So all the types play into this in terms of minus reflectors, my bad. However, of course, reflectors can have gates. They can have a multitude of gates in this circuit group, and it doesn't exclude them from those themes. Okay, so this is also going to kind of blow your mind, hopefully, and help you to look at the body graph in a new light. Okay. When examining circuit groups, that includes all of them independently, right? So all 7, major, minor, a fascinating realization will occur. What you'll notice is how each circuit group has limited access to the 9 centers within the body graph. No single major or minor circuit group has access to all of them. Even the individual circuit, which appears to connect to all 9 centers, is actually technically subdivided into the knowing circuit, the centering circuit, and the integration channel, which individually do not link to each of the 9 centers on their own. It is only through the hub-like function of the centers themselves, okay, so the hub-like function of the centers themselves, that the circuits gain access to all of the other centers, yet only through relationships formed with other circuit groups. For example, the tribal ego circuit only has access to the ajna center and its concepts through its hub connection of the throat, okay, and its connected channels, 1762, 4323, and 1156. Meaning, the tribe is always going to be conditioned by individuals within the collective and their personal concepts and opinions and insights and ideas and beliefs and explanations and details. But the tribe itself has no concern for or is mechanically designed to think, to form opinions, to have beliefs, or even to necessarily have ideas. Please see the difference, right? This circuit group is very material. It's like, hunter-gatherer. Its primary focus is on survival, social bonding, being materially successful, and making money. Period. Everything else, in terms of the pressure to think, analyze, unique identity and love, this is not a concern or even mechanically accessible by the tribe. It's like why, some patriarch doesn't care what you think. Some bitter old angry patriarch with their tribal whatever isn't necessarily going to be concerned about or interested in your inspirational ideas or concepts. All they care about is the survival and the material prosperity of their business, their family union. That's why it's hard to get corporations to think rationally about things. It's not their mechanical concern. They need to be enrolled in it. They, as in, think of like the tribe as an entity, right? Like the tribe needs to be enrolled in it as being something that's going to bring them material gain and advancement so that they can feel more secure, more abundant, safer, ensure the longevity and stability of their family, etc. So in the case of the tribal ego circuit, you will notice how there is access from the root to the spleen, from the root to the solar plexus, both converging in the heart and eventually expressing via the throat center. Therefore, it could be said that the motivation for survival and instinctual pressures drive the tribal energy. The root pushes for security, stability, and the need to ensure that the tribe or family is safe and well-grounded. Instinctual awareness, it does have an awareness center associated with it, but it's instinctual. It's based on memory, based on tradition, is all about the spleen providing a sense of well-being and survival instincts, making decisions in the now that benefit the group or the business or the family. And tight-knit group, not some stranger in the collective. Right? These are people that you can smell. These are people that you can touch. These are people that you have close relationships with. That's what the tribe is concerned about. In terms of emotions or the solar plexus, sensitivity and needs play a significant role in the tribal circuit. The solar plexus represents the emotional waves that can bond the tribe closer to form a community or create friction and cause rejection, as is seen in divorce. The 1949, especially in the 49th gate, this is the gate of rejection, revolution, principles, is where you'll see divorce. Why? Because their needs were not being met, because the support structure wasn't there, because they feel as though their sensitivities were not being recognized. Etc. There's a lot of different reasons why, that this is the energy that pressures us in that way. The heart, or the ego center in tribal circuitry, relates to commitments, promises, and the willpower to support and protect the tribe. It manifests as a sense of duty or responsibility towards the group or family, and the need to be in control of people, assets, and property. This is where you will find the theme of needing to prove one's worth, which is primarily a result of tribal expectations and conditioning, right? So anyone out there, including myself, with an undefined or open heart center, right? The whole idea of feeling unworthy and needing to prove yourself and the conditioning around all of that, it's primarily tribal. Recognize that. The collective doesn't really care about whether or not you're the best, or maybe not the best, but like the need to prove yourself. Individuals certainly don't really care about you needing to prove yourself. It's tribal. It's the family conditioning. It's the hierarchy. It's your boss, or the person that you work for or make money from or for, right? Proving yourself to make money for the business. And of course, as we know, because of the fact that the heart center only has 4 gates, it is statistically one of the least defined centers next to the head center in humanity. So this is an area where many of us have been deeply conditioned by this tribal frequency to prove ourselves, so that we don't die, and so that the family doesn't die, and so that our communities don't fall apart. And you think, wow, those are all really good reasons to prove ourselves. Well, yes. However, as human design teaches us, the conditioning can really drive us into our not self theme, which is individually, not a great place to live. So the 21st gate is the Hunter Huntress. Traditionally, it's described as the gate of control, or the need to be in control. There's a deep connection to money and finances and being responsible or not with money and finances. In business, it's like the chief financial officer. When it's undefined, again, first of all, you got to think about it in the context of you don't have anything to prove. However, you can become wise about control. You can become wise about who has and who does not have, because your primary relationship would be with 45s, 21 to the 45, right? And in fact, this is one of the channels. It's very interesting, and I didn't think I was going to get into much detail about this, but it's worth noting. Ra used to describe this channel as best operating as an electromagnetic, meaning it's difficult when someone has the 45-21 in their design, because the 21 is meant to be in charge of, in your case, controlling things, controlling the family, controlling assets. And the 45 is all about having things, having assets. So it's ideal where you have a situation where you have someone who is, again, the figurehead, and then you have someone who works for the figurehead to maintain control of the family and the community and the assets. Yeah, I mean, the conditioning there would be, I need to prove to my family that I'm in control, when you may not be. Absolutely. For sure. And, it's only in our modern times where we have these complex banking institutions and infrastructure where we think of materialism as being so deeply tied to having a job and earning money. For a long time, in the way this energy would express, it's literally about building things and bartering and trading. I'll do this for you in exchange for you doing this for me. That's the whole basis of the 4037, the channel of community, which is a part of this whole cross of planning thing. I should also mention that. We talk about cycles and the 2027 shift. So this is the circuit group through the 4037 that has been part of the primary background frequency of our era, and our grandparents, great-grandparents, going back for quite a while. Was it 1610, I think, is when this era started? right? Where the background frequency is make a bargain with your neighbor so that we all come together and support the longevity of our communities, right? And also, this is actually a really good question, Bagel, because if you think about what tribal energy actually is, it's tight-knit groups. And what happens when you have a tight-knit group? This is a question. Like, what happens when you come together with other people? You start dancing. Maybe that's because you're an MG. You just have so much energy to share. But think about it. You get conditioned by the people in the group. So you get these hanging gates like you're referencing. Well, those hanging gates more likely than not will become activated and the center will become amplified. So now you have a bunch of activated, amplified, tribal not self, decision-making energies dictating the way our minds go about our daily business. And not to say that's bad, not to say it's good, but human design says, look, you can map it out now and you can see, again, specifically how it affects you in your day-to-day life and interactions with your family. So what I want to do now is I just want to go real quick through the 5 channels. There's 10 gates, 5 channels. The 5432, which again runs between the root and the spleen, okay? This is the design of being driven, channel of transformation, represents the drive and ambition to rise up and be recognized by those in a position higher than your own. 5432s very rarely are born into a situation where they have already attained through inheritance wealth or prestige or position, right? The 5432 energy drives us to rise up, to become more. It's the gate of ambition, right? Ambition to rise up and not fail. Failure fear comes from the 32. So it results in an added pressure to be competitive and maintain continuity in times of change, meaning businesses need to be flexible to changing market demands. And that's the responsibility primarily of the 32 is like, okay, we need to make a critical change. Things are happening. There's a new kind of product demand on our business. Who has the ambition to rise up and fulfill that call? That's one example. The stream then continues to the 4426, which is a channel of surrender. Design of a transmitter. This is an energy and an instinct to sell and market something new as a channel. Remember, right now I'm not really breaking down so much the individual gates, but more so the channels, because the channels are what really represents the life force of the circuitry. This represents the alertness and ego to instinctively sell and market what one believes is necessary for the tribe's well-being, and can express as a form of manipulation and exaggeration, like a salesperson trying to sell you a new car because it's better. It's a better improved version with added safety features. So it's a 4426s, not always, but can make natural salespeople or marketers. By the way, it doesn't mean that every single 4426 you come across is going to be that way, but there's a heavy emphasis in how it's described and understood that that's how it can function. 4426s as transmitters literally can be really good at transmitting information too. Doesn't mean they're necessarily trying to sell something to you per se. They're transmitting information that they instinctively recognize as good for you. That's the whole idea. Of course, as with all things in human design, there's the binary. So the 4426, like I mentioned, can be manipulative and can sell a lie to prevent the truth from being leaked, right? And you can imagine if it has anything to do with loss of resources, loss of control, loss of material gain, Of course they're going to try to lie, right? The only emphasis is on survival, and it's personal and it's tribal and it's competitive. Kind of dog eat dog. Can express that way. Like I mentioned before, the tribal ego circuitry can come across as aggressive. You'll see that in the 45th gate, third line detriment. Now, let's see. Okay, so 5432, 4426, this is like entrepreneurialism. Okay. And on the other side, you've got the 1949, which is the channel of sensitivity, which is a neediness for resources and spirit and community eventually, and bonding and marriage and loyalty, right? It's a different kind of rising up. One is like rise up the corporate ladder, and this side is like join a community so that you can find stability through communal, shared, supportive living. And this is a deep communal longing to be needed and to belong to a community that will both expect and provide support, as is exemplified in marriage. I mentioned before, it's also the energy where you'll get temperamental bitterness and rejection leading to divorce. And if you are, I heard this a while ago, in terms of divorce, the number one reason for it is money problems. And if you think about the tribal ego circuitry being so materially focused and so money oriented, it's not surprising. So we continue the 3740 channel of community. Again, the background frequency of the cross of planning, which we're all currently engaged in, represents the joining of the family with the willpower of the individual to deliver the goods and do things for one another in mutual exchange. Here's the foundation of contracts and mutually beneficial agreements, where one person does something in exchange for something from the other. Now, it can be as mundane and simple as you scratch my back and I'll scratch your back, or it can be something as complex and serious as a new factory that will support jobs within a community. And the coming together of these bigwig CEOs to sign on the dotted line to ensure that the resources are exchanged and that there's a fair bargain in place. I mean, we could go into that for hours because, as we know, of course, I mean, I've worked at a factory, I've worked for General Motors for a short period of time. It's not a fair bargain. The CEOs make billions and billions of dollars, right? And this is when things, again, I want to mention to you guys and kind of help this land for you. Is that although ideally there's fairness in the tribe, how often do we actually see it? Especially in these larger corporate structures, like I just mentioned with like auto manufacturers or something, where you get, this category making this much, but being critical in the operational function and profitability of the business, with the CEOs or the head of the tribes raking in exorbitant amounts of dollars in profit, because the tribe can be very greedy. It can be very ego-centric. And also interesting to note, and this is another thing too, although the sacral, okay, in this chart it's defined because I'm just using this mandala, but if you were to actually look at the tribal ego circuitry in isolation from the other centers, the sacral is undefined, okay? Capitalistic materialism structures, not self-theme, includes not knowing when enough is enough. These are projectors and manifestors not knowing when enough is enough. How many cars do we actually need? Every year. When I was working at GM, I remember they used to make They used to roll off the line anywhere between, I think the number was like 300 to 360 approximately per shift. And there were 3 shifts running 7 days a week for 9 years. They didn't know enough is enough. But the tribe demands more. It wants something new, and every single, see, the 4426 comes in, market something new. These auto manufacturers are pressured to market a new car, some new gadget, some new technology. Doesn't necessarily mean it's actually better, you know? Often with vehicles, just using that as an example because it's such a heavy materialistic thing with so much business emphasis. You know, they'll change the exterior or the interior, add a couple of new airbags, but the motor and the transmission will stay the same for years, right? It's like the core of it's not actually been improved, but the illusion of it being a better vehicle, right? And then you can sell that to people. People will buy it. The tribe will manipulate for material gain. That's why there are so many ego problems. People have emotional sensitivity and fear, sense of lack, mistrust, again, bitter angerness around this energy because it can be, well, on one end, it can be supportive and really necessary and amazing to be a part of a tribe and a community that you feel a part of. And at the other end of the spectrum, you know, where I used to say it's like, yeah, but not everybody was, gets to sit at the table. Now, ultimately, the entire circuit group, and this is the last channel before I go into King George's example, and then we're pretty much done. So ultimately, the entire circuit group is expressed via the 2145 channel of money, where the willpower to be in control joins with the possessive voice of I have or I don't have. The balanced, and so I was saying there's extremes, right? But the balanced and benevolent expression of this energy is to gather, protect, and educate the tribe so that it survives and remains competitive and stable when dealing with other tribes. That's kind of the, the core responsibility and expectation for this energy. Not that it always expresses that way. So again, if you see 4521s, don't shame them because they're not doing their job properly. They may not even realize. They may have that whole channel unconscious. They don't even know that they're a materialist. They don't identify as embodying that responsibility, as is the case with King George. So we're going to move on in just a moment to an example with him because he has this energy. And when I read a little bit about his history, it's not long, it's not like a documentary or anything, but just to give you guys an idea, you'll see, wow, okay, kind of get it. So King George V, this is his chart here, okay? It's accurate birth time, birth data. King George V reigned as King of the United Kingdom and the British Dominions and Emperor of India from 1910 to 1936. As a member of the British royal family, King George V inherited significant wealth and lived a privileged life. The monarchy, as with other European monarchies of the era, maintained vast estates, art collections, and other assets. These represented both personal wealth and symbols of the nation's history and prestige. So again, here you have a 4521 channel of money, a design of the materialist, king. Again, this is an extreme example, but it's a good example nevertheless of how this energy can express and how you can see it being embodied in people throughout history. The king's main role with respect to the nation's finances was actually symbolic. He was a figurehead, representing the stability and continuity and tradition of the nation. His image was used on currency and stamps, reinforcing the connection between the monarchy and the nation's economic system. During the Great Depression, which began in 1929, King George V played a critical role in maintaining national morale. Defined ego, right? While he did not have direct control over economic policies, his public appearances and messages were aimed at fostering unity and hope within the nation. The nation had just been ravaged by the First World War, hit by the Great Depression, and it was not an easy time for the nation. And yet here we have someone with the ego and the morale to be able to communicate on behalf of the tribe, to have influence and bring a sense of progress and change through social interaction to those under his reign. While King George V did not have direct control over the nation's finances or economic policies, his reign and actions were closely intertwined with the financial health and well-being of his subjects. The king's responsibilities primarily revolved around maintaining the symbolic strength of the monarchy, providing stability during challenging times, and using his influence, he's a 31, judiciously in the best interests of the continuity of the nation. So again, here you have someone whose wisdom in this life is going to be around making splenic decisions that ensure continuity and financial stability of the nation. So again, just an interesting example for you guys. And again, you'll see this as you run charts of either famous people that you come across, people in your family, friends, even yourselves, right? How this circuitry and how this tribal energy, when embodied, especially if there's a channel, right? Because I know you guys have asked some great questions about the hanging gates, which is common. It's when you have a channel defined, because the channel represents that alive, active life force that you will see people often acting in ways that are very tribal. And again, it's either going to be a kind of tribalism where there's this entrepreneurial advancement, marketing, sales, businessy, or more spiritual, communal approach. It's a great question. It could be a blend of both. And again, it would be you would have to interpret that on a case by case basis. But let's say you have a 4426 and they've got the 4037. So maybe here you'll have a salesperson that is really good at marketing and bringing in resources for their community, and that if they're a projector, again, just using projector example, they'll find success in that endeavor. It's a great question, and it's kind of a case by case process. And what you can do, again, now that you know this, you can look at the chart and you can say, okay, what type are they? If they're a projector, again, here you have, and let's say they have the 5432, and they've got the 4426. All right, if that's the only two channels they have, they're a projector with the ambition to rise up and not fail, and the instinct to sell and market something new. And that would be natural for them. They would have a version of that. And if it's a blend, let's say it's a manifester of 4521 with the 4037, here's someone who is primarily concerned to have and be in control and to make will or have the willpower for bargains and contracts. And you'll see that. See, that's the thing. And I'll use King George as an example. Right? He was the king. He wasn't the one working in the factories. Okay? He wasn't actually working there. He wasn't selling products on behalf of the stability of his community. He was a figurehead for the financial stability of the community or of the nation. You see? Look, I get it. Sometimes it's like challenging because you go, wow, I've got the 4521 and I don't feel like I'm a materialist. I don't necessarily feel like I have a need to be in control of things or have a ton of money in order to feel at peace or successful. It's all in the art of the interpretation. What you'll see from learning this today is that there are these foundational mechanics where, okay, support, right? Do you feel supported, and are you able to offer support to those you care about or not? And does that bring you a sense of your signature? If you're a 4037, doesn't necessarily mean you're going to be plugged into this huge community. It doesn't mean you're going to be like a sannyasin or something, and now you're, you know, dancing and having a great time, unless you're dancing and having a great time like Bagel. But it does mean that there's a need to be conscientious of the bargains and the contracts and the promises that you make to people that you care about, right? And yeah, like I said, if you guys have got the definitive guide, or even there are other textbooks too, like the circuitry textbooks, like Human Design America sells them. You can read up in further detail about each one of these channels, and it'll give you a deeper appreciation and understanding. And then, of course, it takes time and, reflection and sharing and observation. Observation is a big part of design, especially if you're a projector and you can look at other people and their chart. You'll see it. I've seen it. I've seen it without even trying, which is what's most surprising about it, right? It's like I'm not looking for it, but I know that they have this channel, and all of a sudden there it is. They're speaking the keynotes, or they're acting out in a certain way. They're demanding support. They're bitter or they're angry because the resources aren't there to cover what the family is expecting of them, or they have an abundance of resource and there's ease or still anger, which is, again, just because people have money doesn't mean they're happy either. Just because they have material resources or may have one of these channels defined that gives them quote unquote advantage for operating in the world of tribal bargains and business and all that kind of stuff, doesn't mean that they are content or happy with their position in life. But there's more areas in the chart, which you'll see as we go through each one of them. Yeah, and I think I mentioned this already, but it's just another thing to take note of, is which centers are missing from tribal circuitry, right? The sacral is a part of it because it's got the minor circuit group, but the G center, the ajna, and the head. Without direct access to the G center, tribal circuitry does not necessarily emphasize individual direction, role, and love in the same way as other circuits. Its focus is more on the community and the immediate bonds of family and support, rather than individual love and identity, or the collective and its tendency to share and criticize and critique and seek perfection in the experience, or the security and predictability which logic provides. The head center, again, not having access to the head center, there's less emphasis on mental pressure to answer big questions or gaining access to inspiration in the abstract or universal sense. Tribal energies are more concerned with practical day-to-day matters and the immediate needs of the tribe or community, not mental inspiration. And again, the Ajna Center, lack of access to the Ajna Center means that the tribal community is not necessarily focused on processing information, forming opinions, or being analytical. That's the job of the collective and the individual. Instead, tribal awareness is based more on instinct, tradition, emotion, and what serves the immediate members of its community and or business. Ultimately, tribal ego circuitry centers, including the root, sacral, spleen, solar plexus, ego, and throat, indicates that tribal circuitry is grounded, responsive to life force energy, instinctive, emotional, driven by willpower and ego, and has the potential to express and manifest in the world. Its primary concern, if we all boil it down, is the well-being, safety, and sustenance of its bonded, close-knit groups and memberships. In essence, tribal circuitry is geared toward family, support, and community, ensuring that basic needs are met and immediate bonds are honored.